This is Raúl Hurtado's English podcast, and this is episode 8. Today's turn is for The Way of No Conditions, a rock song about the way to becoming love.
Walking in the woods of creation, sticking to the way of no conditions.
Back in 2016, I wrote most of the songs in my second album, Inner Road to Somewhere, an album about all what happens when a person commits to growing in the inside, in other words, to growing spiritually. It was by then that I think I heard for the first time about unconditional love as a way of living. This was a new concept, an idea that brought out something new and positive in me, something that taught me that love is not just something we feel towards certain people and things, but rather that love is a way of living in the world. This way of living is characterized by a love that is unconditional, that is, loving others without conditions, loving others despite our personal inclinations and differences. Speaking of himself, Jesus said, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." John 14:6. We also know that Jesus is God and that God is love. 1 John 4:8. If we link the two last ideas, we could say that Jesus is the way to God, the way to love, as well as that Jesus is the only one who can turn us into love. Back to the song, I defined the way of no conditions as the way to becoming love. This way is a path that takes us closer and closer to God, which means that Jesus not only is the way of no conditions, but that he also takes us ever closer to God, the Father, as we learn more and more about Jesus. The way of no conditions begins in the song by describing a way of living in which we see things as opposites. From one side, there are people and things we love. From the other, there are people and things that we don't love. If we continue to learn more about Jesus while putting his words into practice, the way of no conditions takes us to loving certain people and things and preferring less others. This new way of loving is significantly different from the first, because in the first we either love or not love. In the second we either love or love less. Advancing on the way of no conditions, once again by learning about Jesus and by putting his words into practice, leads us to seeing the world as neutral. All animals and things that surround us are good in nature, and whatever we see in them that we don't like, we understand that it's just part of their nature. From this point on, advancing even more on the way of no conditions seems to be linked to surrendering completely, to letting go of all attitudes, personal opinions, prejudices, ways of thinking that ultimately block the light of God. So, letting Jesus fill ourselves up with love seems to require that we do our part, which is to remove in us all what prevents God's love from entering. Letting Jesus fill ourselves up with love changes our perception of the world, which by now we start to see as benign, as harmless. But the way of no conditions doesn't stop here. If we persevere in this removing all what blocks God's love, Jesus himself will fill us with all what he is. And if Jesus, who is God, who is love, comes to fill every particle in us with who he is, then we become love by virtue of his presence. What a beautiful conclusion this is. To think that Jesus will turn us into love if we allow him to do so. To think that we can become a single entity with Jesus by fusing with his eternal love. Time to close the episode by listening to my song, The Way of No Conditions. My name is Raúl Hurtado, and until the next episode with another great song.
walking in the woods of creation, trying to find the way of no conditions. It becomes clear how I separate all into things that I love and I don't love. People I would die for, people I would never love, animals I cherish, and others that I rather see no more. Walking in the woods of creation, moving on the way of no conditions, I begin to live in the world of preference, where things are either preferred or less preferred. People I would die for, people I'd maybe forgive. Nature is what it is, and I see beauty more and more. Walking in the woods of creation, on the way of no conditions, I begin to see a neutral world as I surrender my points of view that block the light of love and admiration for a world that lies behind. Every beat counts, every attitude counts on the way of no conditions, the way to becoming love. Walking in the woods of creation, sticking to the way of no conditions, I begin to see the light that's intrinsic to all beings, and which reveals a divine web. Love is ever present and increases as I love. Love is omnipresent and fills the woods of creation with inner joy.